That's really interesting what you're saying because I would say that I don't agree with what you're saying. Like, yes, okay, but this knowledge is non-propositional.
Try to highlight, I think maybe the underlying um, disagreement we have here is actually one that goes to Vervaeke's model because it's like one is primary or the other is primary. Either a proposition is primary or or uh, participation and being and knowing what it's like is primary. Then things ultimately ground out in is the subjective human experience.
I can caricature it by saying, okay, you have your heuristic, your perspectival, your participatory that is choosing, and then you rationalize it propositionally afterward. So I was at the same time eager to 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 have this discussion with you, but at the same time I was wondering, damn, the topics uh, are so wide, you know.
Right.
So do you
Like a
want
feeling
to?
of not being sure exactly what we'll talk about, because is that what you're saying?
Yeah, um, we have a, a lot to talk about, let's say. So yeah, feel free to launch the topic if you want.
For sure, for sure. So I think what I said as a topic was basically wanting to just get your like model of reality, kind of like maybe an ontological model or like what you ground epistemology in.
The theory of yeah, like the theory of everything.
Right.
It's like
I
concept of
actually I also wanted to maybe jump in on another thing. This is something I was curious about. So for Vervaeke's theory, so Vervaeke has a theory of everything. You are um, a fan of Vervaeke. You would contest that. Interesting.
yeah. Like I don't know if he has a theory of everything. I think is in the search of this theory of everything, but as you can see in many of his lectures, or when he talks, even in a podcast, or he often says that the thing that he's presenting is not consensual, and but evidences of research domains tend to um, like go in the same sense, go in the same direction, try to reinforce the plausibility of that theory or tend to invalid this theory. It's like in mathematics, you can demonstrate that it doesn't work, but it's very hard to demonstrate that something works in every case. So I don't know him personally. I never met him, but I've seen extensive amount of content, really multiple dozens of hours, maybe more than 100 hours of video content, but it, it seems really scientific to me. And you can also see that in his history and the approach that he have of a divine idea, because he tends to have this approach with a non-theistic approach to the divine, uh, and that's interesting about him and about his story because he was raised in a really Christian fundamentalist family, and then he went out of that, but it's still really embedded in himself, that this idea that there might be something above, you know.
I've heard him
So
describe himself as a Neoplatonist.
yes, and he describes, by the way, the approach of Jonathan Pajot as Neoplatonistic Christianism, and that's interesting because it's like things are converging to the sacred, and not the sacred is not presupposed. Even if Jonathan Pajot is presupposing a lot of time the sacred, but as he is a believer, I think it's fair. But John Vervaeke, they tend to agree on many different concepts of reality, of their sort of theory of everything, if you want to put it that way. But sometimes they arrive to the same conclusion, presupposing that something above exists, and sometimes not. And that's what is really, really interesting for me about the theory of everything. Has John Vervaeke tends to elaborate. I don't think he has it like, this is my theory of everything. I am Nietzsche, and this is the story of the world. And this is, yeah, you see, probably is more scientific in his mind, and so he tends to follow the threads of experience, of what studies show, even if studies by themselves are guided by what we want to search for. So yeah, that was my first thought about like saying that there's a theory of everything. But yeah, to me, Vervaeke is really, really his his attempt to explain the world through at least not the world, but the human experience of the world with a elegant, very elegant and very plausible theory of um, being is about mattering and about belonging. Yeah, it blew my mind the first time I saw his lecture about it.
So, what would you say then is your grounding for what you think is, a good idea? Is it sort of that thing where it's how many disparate fields kind of converge? Um, do do you have a scientific basis? I know because you're a doctor, you clearly the material itself that is grounded in science. But you also seem to have this uh, openness towards other modes of operating.
Yeah. Um, of course, when you're taking care of the health of your patient, and you have to gather a reasonable amount of information that you can prove, sort of, or that you can rely on to make decisions, because otherwise it's very dangerous. But it's like John Vervaeke probably, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but probably would say that doing things arbitrarily is not a way to conduct. Probably our species would have disappeared if we were only able to do things arbitrarily. And but on the opposite side, there is the rationalization of everything, and the thing that our cognition is not able to compute combinatorially explosive amount of variables. And so we have heuristics, and so we have bias. So I'd say in my professional life, I tend to base my approach on the thing that I can understand and can prove. And by the way, it's a rule in the College of Medicine. It's a rule that you can perform care only on the thing that you master. Mastering a thing, it means that you can provide it with reliable quality and explaining why you do that. So it presupposes that you can explain it propositionally. But sometimes you can see an account in many doctors, what many doctors say, sometimes they say that I got these intuitions, you know. They're not always saying, oh, yeah, the science, the evidence-based told that and things, and sometimes they're right. And especially, you know, I've been doing, I don't have big experience on that, but I've been touching a little on war medicine and extreme emergencies. And the fact is that you have a lot of intuition and heuristics in these situations. And the more you train, the more you embed, you integrate this rational patterns of acting in your heuristics. That's the purpose of training, probably. And so when you are really, really stressed in very stressful situation, you will apply heuristics that are trained. The purpose of training is to be able to not do things arbitrarily when you're under a tremendous amount of pressure. To have heuristics that you already trained and that are not only dependent on what you as an individual would do without training. So, but as my own theory of the meaning in life and the sense, the meaning of things and of the functioning of everything, let's say that I think about it a lot. It doesn't help me much necessarily on my mental health front, let's say, because probably it's psychiatrists and psychologists would say it's probably based on my structure of personality. If you talk to with the concept of the Big Five presented by it's Costa McCrae, the first model, but Jordan Peterson talks a lot about it. I would say probably scoring high in neuroticism, which is sensitivity to negative emotions. And so my heuristics tend to pick and to pick negatives or dangerous things in my surrounding or even in my own mind, to say, oh, pay attention to this and this. And this has a awful tendency to lead to nihilism. So I'd say when I try to think about a theory of everything, I need to be, I don't like to say that because it presupposes that it doesn't presuppose, but it suggests that I'm believing in God for the benefits of believing in Him and not for this own sake. But let's say that it's either I integrate the theistic idea in my conception of things, or I tend to fall in the void, in a spiral of thought that is leading me down to what Jonathan Pajot calls a diabolical thing. It's like it's breaking things apart and apart and apart and apart at the point that I cannot even say who am I, who I am, what I am. And a thought about this is the boat of Theseus, the ship of Theseus. Like you replace the parts, and is it the same ship at the end? Because you replaced most of it, and that kind of thinking is it can really have a grip on me, and it can dissolve my identity sometimes, and so I need to have this integrated non-theistic cues that leads me towards a supreme good, or towards something unified and symbolic and good, because if I don't know if I would do more good or harm in the life. And I think I pledge myself to do not harm. So yeah, I don't know if it's if it's the kind of answer that you were asking for, but
Definitely the kind of answer I was asking for. Yeah, that's it. You describe sort of a very scientific model, and then the the you call it neurotic places your mind goes, where those constraints and heuristics seem to fall apart and give way to the void. Um, and
yeah, it leads precisely to the void, because it's dismantling things up to their smallest parts, and so things cannot have meaning in this dimension.
the scientific model, it's a model that some people think is the only plausible worldview that you can have. Is this sort of how can we explain this stuff propositionally? That's kind of the scientific way of doing things. Or how can we, you know, um, run as an experiment that repeats and extract some kind of patterns that emerge from that? Um, that scientific way of viewing things as stuff having an explanation um, seems to be a part of your epistemology, because you look at what things are in that kind of scientific way of kind of explaining things, but then at some point the explanation tree has a gap, right?
I'd say yes. It's more on an approach on ontology than an approach on metaphysics, to me, because I've been I am still, probably, even if I do less of these things these days, but I've been a methodologist, so I've been working on how to perform scientific analysis in the healthcare domain. And thing is, it's more ontology, because I'm not a big philosopher. Even if I try to have this kind of processes in my mind, and to think deeply about things and trying to see the epistemology. But when you read a scientific article, by definition, it is what they try to describe is ontology. They try to describe what is, because it's rarely the case that we can describe, if any we can do is. No, I'm sorry, I have a terrible English, but if only it is possible, I don't think that we can describe the why question, the why of that. Epistemology tends to have you change the frame, you break the frame, you try to integrate other point of views. So yeah, that's why it's really sexy as an explanation of the world, when you have different starting points, but it's starting to converge and to unite. And I often use the analogy with the multifaceted, globe that was used in the discotheques in the 80s. I don't know how to call it in English, but that there's this ball with an infinite face, multiple faces of mirror on it, and it sparkles the light and it distributes the light everywhere. And to me, this sort of sphere is composed of faces, but geometrically you can say it's you can separate it in an infinity of prismas that converge to a center. And each prisma, it can diffract the light, but it diffracts the light also when the light comes, and it could lead to a frame making. It's an infinite amount of frames to look at a central reality, because I'd say, if I have a claim to make, I'd say, in my belief, that I think there is a objective reality. I don't think that we can grip it. I think that we can view it through, and maybe one goal of my life, one purpose of my life, I cannot say its meaning, but its purpose at least, would be to gather and to have a comprehensive, integrative integrated view with as many of this prisma possible. I can manage to tend to have a theory of everything. Would be probably my dream, but probably my doom. If by a miracle or by cyber technology plugged in, that enables psychotechnologies to develop even more and to externalize a part of thing. It's also referring to the problem of knowing what I am finally, if I become half a cyborg. But if it's given to me to have this kind of knowledge, I don't even know if we as humans are able to sustain it, are even able to support such an amount of information that you need to plug.
So help illuminate my understanding of a conflict I see in what you're saying. The conflict I see in what you're saying, it's not a propositional, but experiential one, sort of between your experience and what you propose. Because what you say you experience is when you go into the philosophy, you can end up in a place that's nihilistic. And then what you say propositionally is that the models of reality are so complex that what we're seeing, what we're experiencing is reflections of them, but never an ability to actually harness them. What I wonder then is, why do you experience this feeling of of not being of the meaning itself dissipating as you go into philosophy when you have a deep sense that you cannot also even grasp anything, because it seems like if you were to experience not grasping anything, that wouldn't be a feeling of nihilism, but rather a feeling of mysticism.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for this, for picking up on what I said, because I think it's really important to have a dialogical approach on things, because uh, being alone in my head or being alone in anyone's head generally is less effective than talking, even if some evidences tend to diverge on that. But yes, see what you mean. The thing is that I think I consider it as being nihilism because it's mysticism, because I cannot grasp, indeed, but it's ineffable. It's mystic because I cannot grasp it and it's ineffable. But what I can say is that to me, the fact that it doesn't provide me a meaning challenges my hierarchy of values, and so we disintegrate it in nihilism because I don't really know what is the true value.
Right.
And I think that's how Christianity tends to help me, let's say, or the idea of a God that is helping me to gather my strength and to gather my energy, to not disperse it into my impulsions and whims and wants, and try to gather it towards something that maybe sometimes is greater than only a purpose. Because what I struggle to have in my life is a meaning. And that's also why probably the attempt of resolving the meaning crisis by John Vervaeke is so impactful on me, and also probably why also I was so interested in the writings of Jordan Peterson in the back to 2019. Yeah, it's probably why. So I tend to I can identify purposes, but it's really hard for me to pinpoint the overt part of the meaning of the mattering. I don't know if
It does make sense. Well, I mean, and I've experienced sort of the same probably thing, or at least I can very much deeply intuit what that is.
Do you want to expand a little on what you mean, even not necessarily disclosing the private event of your life, but the mechanism of your mind that you're describing, or maybe you're having an insight of right now?
Yeah. So, I can recall a time when I was diving into this meaning question, going way into it, and what I found at the bottom of it was metaphysical questions about reality. Is reality the kind of place where anything at all can be done? Um, there's a you can write down at the bottom, you can propose or suppose that there is a God of the universe who doesn't allow for people to progress. So, I mean, and this is something you can experience if you just haven't, if you're not accomplishing anything in the moment and you think, well, maybe it's not that I'm just not accomplishing anything, but maybe nothing can be accomplished, nothing meaningful can happen. And, my feeling at this place way down there was, well, if I can't do anything of meaning, then what's the point of doing anything at all? Because life can be difficult as well. And um it yeah, it's like it wasn't precisely, you didn't say depression. There was no depression involved in that. It was just this feeling of there needs to be something about reality where I can build something. Because if I'm not able to build anything of meaning, then there's like no point. So I feel like that's a similar thing.
Yes, probably in what you just said, I can identify myself. Not always, but sometimes. Makes me think about a huge amount of things, different things are going through my head right now, and
Let me throw out, unless you have something specific, I'll throw out sort of like what I observed as what meaning actually is. And I'm curious if you can deconstruct this or if it has any weight. But I observed that, and I'll run through it very um sort of as an outline, but it seemed like a priori, at the very, very beginning of knowing anything, there is such a thing as information. There's such a thing as data that exists. There's sort of persistence over time. There's uh what would be Aristotle's the law of identity. Things can exist and then things can have relationships to other things. And I thought, well, um it seems like there's sort of two possibilities. It's like, is it better for there to be things existing at all or no things? And if it's better to have things that exist, then that same betterness that things that exist at all, this sort of presupposes a non-nihilistic perspective at the base of it. But if you think anything at all is better, then what derives from that is this meaning in more things. And so my understanding of what meaning is that it's about like more complexity, more beauty, more harmony. Like, so if we think about um just historically what humanity was like farther way back beginning of time versus now, there's a huge increase in technology, complexity, the technology of language, the way we think. There's just more individual computations happening. There's more moments, more interactions, there's more stuff. It's just a higher amount of things. And so I equate meaning with the increase in harmonious complexity. Um, so like at the in that model, I did presuppose that something is better than nothing, but from that presupposition, it seems like a meaning is evident, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
what Jonathan Pajot said at the beginning of his course, of his lecture, on the symbolic in Christianity is, I think I won't have the exact sentence, but is meaning is unavoidable. There is meaning everywhere in everything. But my question about it, and my question to you about it, is that I understand that you described me. You made to me you made an argument for how or how is meaning existing in this world, but probably it's me who badly understood, but there was no explanation on how do you live this definition of meaning. And
Yeah, well,
I had so if you can elaborate on that, but I had a small question before that, which is not so small, but it was not clear to me if you meant that existence precedes identity or if identity precedes existence. You know, the old thing that essence precedes existence or existence precedes essence.
basically, do I have a Platonic or an Aristotelian model, right?
Yes, I think not only Plato and Aristotle had this debate. I think I'm not as probably I'm not as no knowledgeable, or I don't know how to say about this as you, but I think this debate was also a debate in the modern era, and even after that. But yes, does existence precede essence, or is it the other way around? That's the question I should
Yeah,
ask you.
very big question. Well, I'll answer the bigger but easier question, the first question, first about what that is like for me in practice. Um, for me in practice, um, it's kind of like derived from morality because I I then see this description provides a rubric for analyzing a large set of things, which are they meaningful or are they not meaningful under a hierarchical evaluative structure. I can go, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Um, and then I approach sort of a good thing. And so uh, I aim at this several different ways, philosophically, socially, and artistically. And each one of the aims has this pattern where I'm able to delineate between the noise, the nothing, and then the actual something. Um, and so I'll describe this artistically, very concretely. So I observed a lot of different ways people can do things. So the artists nowadays seem to be the people who um they're like, oh, I want to make money. So what am I going to do is I'm going to try to create some video or something, a website or something on the internet that will attract a lot of attention. And then I will get that attention and I will get money from that. And what I see in the DNA of a lot of these things is that it's not only worthless, worth it's counterproductive because somebody may synthesize some, maybe they'll synthesize Kant. They'll take a deep, true academic valuable information and they'll make it worse. And then you stumble across this on the internet and you sort of slog through it thinking you're getting something because there's a piece of something, but because it was sort of slower, you get less. And
or fragmented.
Fragmented, yeah. And yeah, another, what people are doing all the time is they're they're making things which appear to have meaning, sort of like they have social dynamics that they video, and then there's a feeling like, oh, something important is happening here, when really nothing important is really happening because it's not answering that question of what is they're not building more. They're just creating noise between your understanding, between you seeing that there's nothing there and you seeing something. So it's like, they're like, it's like a circus. They're like, oh, all the stuff's happening, going on. I mean, I haven't seen a circus in many, many years. I've never even seen one in town because there's something really, in my opinion, generally speaking, meaningless about going to a circus. It's like we are doing all this stuff, but after you've seen it, after you've seen the capability of humans, you're like, I don't need to see it more. And so, um, what it does on a practical point, uh, is it leads me to analyzing a large set of factors and understanding where's humanity actually going, like where are we actually at, and wanting to be on that edge so that I can actually participate in the movement of humanity. So musically, I'm working on building software that helps people learn music, which is actually meaningful because music is actually, um, it's a more, right? It's something which is more that humanity has. And if we have, if somebody goes through their day and they do a set of things and then they go through the same day, but they do the same set of things, but also have music on it, it's like that's more. And so I'm able to, I'm able to delineate between those things. But yeah, it leads me basically to wanting to actually, like actually do something, that's adding by calculating all these other things as are they actually adding, are they not adding? So it cuts out a massive amount of things that I can do, but the actual things that exist there are, so I talked for a while. So before going on to the second thing, yeah, I guess I wonder what you think about that.
Mm, yeah, it's interesting that you talked about it in terms of creating things, or you can create or you can corrupt. And in the biblical sense, the God can create, and the forces of evil can only corrupt, they don't create. So that's interesting because you were also talking for a few seconds about, or touching the subject of the difference in between the good and the bad, or the good and the evil. And I think it can link to this. And you said that, yeah, but you can also perceive in this perversion, or in this corruption of genuine material, a sparkle of the true nature of the genius original masterpiece, for example. And it reminded me about that we were talking about theory of everything, but a big aspect of that on the value and probably on the meaning is that what is the definition of good and what is the definition of bad? What is the definition of good and what is the definition of evil? And before exposing what I think about it, I would like to I would like to hear what is your conception?
I mean, yeah, so I think maybe I said this, but maybe it wasn't as explicit as I thought it was, but my conception of the good versus the bad can, in some way, and this touches on the essence or not, but sort of essence or identity, or what was the dichotomy you presented? Does essence precede?
Does essence precedes existence, or is it the other way around?
Right. So from that perspective, humans have this ability to interface with the Platonic forms. And some people will say, do those even exist, or are those only uh, things we abstract out from existence itself? And it seems like, irregardless of if those are abstractions or not, those are the only objects we have in mental space to work with. And so, whatever they are, do they precede existence or not? They, in my estimation, are still paramount despite their true ontological status, because they are the only things that we can work with. If we don't give them any credibility because of their lack of preeminence, then we can't think at all. And so, from that perspective of valuing the Platonic form as highly, highly important, I then derive morality in some very, very mathematical sense, which I view it at the base as being purely quantitative. Uh, if you have a bad person, they do something, any number of bad things. I think that all of those bad things can be distilled down into a quantitative factor. So let's say you have a person in a relationship, and this person is like very, very controlling and very, very, abusive and all these things. You can say, well, how is that less? Because they're just doing something that's different. I would say it's less because the function of um, pernicious of ill behavior, as we define it as humans, is that it decreases the amount of freedom a person has, and therefore decreases, the amount of things that there are in general. So a person, can either be, say, they're locked in jail. That person has way less things they can do. They just literally can't do as many things. Therefore, I mean, if you sort of map their mind onto like a something that you can analyze, and you just see literally less computations happening. You just see less moments of consciousness happening. So it like Hitler. Well, it's like, well, Hitler was somebody who was massively decreasing the amount of stuff that was happening. And so even though to kill Hitler would be to decrease one person's moment of um, multiple things happening for them, overall for the set the population, it would be more because less people would have died overall. And so that way of viewing it as just more things seems to, in every single case, lead to a genuine pure morality.
Hmm. Okay. Oh yeah, it touches topics that are so. Huh. I mean, are we certain that killing Hitler during the First World War would have been a lifesaver in the ultimate analysis, let's say? No, I mean, of course, uh, but of course it would have saved probably many people. I don't know if it would have saved the same people. I don't know if it would have saved in a definite amount more or less, because I tend to have this idea in my mind that I'm really, really agreeing with what Jordan Peterson says about tyrannical patterns. I don't know. Have you read Ordinary Man?
No.
It's a book I deeply recommend to you. It's Jordan Peterson talked about it when he talked about Hitler. You know, there is more of Hitler in each one of us than we think. And if it wouldn't have been him, it would have been someone else, because the Republic of Weimar in Germany was so disastrous and corrupt, and the explosion was unavoidable. Would it have been in another shape, and would it have been another overpopulations, because multiple populations suffered, would have been overpopulation or the same population but in a different amount? I don't know. And probably, you know, the 20th century was the century of, let's say, the authoritarian regimes. It could have been socialist, it could have been communist, could have been fascist, could have been many things, but and also many of these atrocities were presented as humanistic and has good things, and it had some good effects sometimes on some parts, but of course measuring the good compared to the atrocities that have been done is almost pointless. But it's important to acknowledge that many people adhered to the Nazi party not because they were anti-Semitic or not because they were bad people. My grandmother was well treated by Nazi Germany family during she was deported. As soon as she arrived in this family, she was well better treated than in the camps. And so is this brings me to this idea that Jonathan Pajot tends to talk about, of evil is a misplaced good, that there is no essential evil things, like it's a good that has been corrupted or misplaced. It's a good that has been placed in the hierarchy, in the sacrifice of other goods that should have prevailed at this moment. It's the idea that I tend to have of the good and evil. It's really, really congruent, let's say, with what the Bible would explain. At least it could be congruent with certain readings of the Bible, that it is a misplaced good. But yeah, your point is interesting about this. But I was also wondering about when you say these people are doing like corrupted things, like they like Instagrammers and influencers and things about art, it's like they do things because they want to obtain a material gain. It reminds me the two theories. I think it's Apters. It's the telic versus the paratelic. So do you do things for the benefit, the external benefit that it will bring you, or do you do thing for the sake of doing the thing? Do you derive, I mean, your joy and the pleasure by attaining the goal, or is it the path to attain the goal that brings you pleasure or meaning? It's more joy and pleasure in the Aptors theory than really meaning, but could account for meaning. And the second theory, I think it's from Fromm, is the thing that it's the modal confusion. John Vervaeke talks a lot about this. The modal confusion is like you want to be something, and so maybe it has something to do with the fact that we tend to propositionalize everything. We tend to reduce everything to its propositional form. So I want to be loved, or to feel loved. Therefore, I have a lot of sexual partners. It's the being mode versus the having mode. And because I reduce, it's a reduction things. It's a reductionist approach. It's like love is not having a certain number of sexual partners. Meaning or success in life is not counted on the number of likes on your video or the number of dollars that the platform paid you in consequence of this video. Is it something that you were is it does it make sense with what you were trying to say about?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see a through line through everything that you're saying here. So starting from the Nazi um, situation, I felt like this may have been implicit in what you were saying, but one of the things that led to the Nazi the problem was the confidence in their moral decisions, their confidence in their ability to do morality. They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, so to speak. Um, and this, I felt like was maybe you were implicitly pushing back on what I was saying a bit to say that, well, if you are going to reduce something to a mathematical structure of morality, what you may run the risk of is then uh, creating a moral framework that allows for certain atrocities. Um,
Hmm. Oh, that's really interesting because that was not exactly what was in my mind. So thank you for bringing this forward. I wasn't really thinking about this when I said that. So that's really interesting that you
okay,
thought about this. So
because you also said like, how do we know that what Hitler did isn't bad? Because in this mathematical expression of what morality is, well, perhaps what Hitler may have done was, yes, he killed a bunch of people, but then he got rid of maybe an idea that was existing that then allowed for people to be more expressive and more creative, and it like, in the same way, like wiping out a really negative tribe of people may then allow for other tribes to be more flourishing because they're not going to have to deal with the barbaric attacks that they impose on them. So you can justify this kind of thing. And in what you were saying just now, um, which I forget, but the through line through everything seems to be that. Oh yeah, so it was the confusing the being with the having. The through line through all this seems to be making a determinate decision about what is moral without having all the proper information, because you or this framework said that there's a difference between sort of like being and then sort of having something. I am reframing that as it is having less information, because if you are sitting there and you think that you need love, so you think you want to have something, I don't view that as really as much a confusion between the having and the being as it is a lack of information about what it means to be loved. So somebody has a bunch of partners, and yes, on the lower level they're confusing being and having, but if they had enough information to know what love really was, they would see that, oh, I see multiplicity of partners doesn't equate to that. And so, um,
Hmm. Okay.
yeah, seems like you have something to say.
Yes, but I don't want you to lose your ID, so go ahead.
Okay, so then I'll tie it all up together to sort of answer that um the question there, which seems to be making a moral decision, right? Is it about, should I have more partners, or is it about should we have killed Hitler, or was what Hitler did even good, or any of those things? Um, I I have a uh, I do have complex models actually to add to it. It's not a simple answer to this. It's a series of complex models that I can address this with. So when it comes to how do we deal with should this person be killed or not, there is a model that shows that if you have a neural structure, a neural framework, um, and if any part, I feel like I may have said this to you before, but if any part of that is is psychopathic, if any part of that is purely calculative and anything like that, and doesn't entirely want the human spirit to flourish in its fullness, then the entire mind is then sort of corrupted. And so when it comes to a problem of like, okay, well, we have a mathematical framework for how what is more moral, and sometimes less people is more moral because those people were hindering the rest of people, right? If you had like one dictator that's just suppressing everybody, maybe it's moral to actually kill that person. But if you have this other framework or sort of layered into your cognition that says that at any moment, if you view any individual life as less than because of some attribute that it fails to come up with. So Hitler viewed old people, Jewish people, um, other people, as sort of less than. What that means is that the whole mind is therefore psychopathic because you're not valuing the human spirit, you're valuing some propositional thing on top of that. And so I feel like that model of the purity of love, as maybe you could label it as being absolutely necessary. That a mind must be entirely loving for it to be loving at all, because that goes back to what you were saying about every person could sort of embody Hitler, and uh, that's something I think is important to consider. It's that yes, everybody actually could entirely, support Hitler, because if somebody is 99% of the time completely loving, but then just 1% of the time not. It's like, well, what if you end up in that 1% of the time? Like the scenario just ends up in that situation where, like, oh, well, in this 1% of the time, they actually just want to go on a killing rampage. It's like, then in my mind, that person doesn't have actual true love because they're just situationally propped up by, but yeah, this.
That's really interesting what you're saying because I would say that I don't agree with what you're saying, but when you were talking about the being and a having mode, the thing that they don't have enough information about what love is, so they confuse being loved with the having mode. Is like, yes, okay, but this knowledge is non-propositional. That's the difference between the being and the having mode, is that to be in the being mode, you need to forget about having. You need, it's being, so it's knowing by being. It's the participatory level. You know, especially love, because if it's to take the words of John Vervaeke, is that love is the co-creation of the agent arena relationship at the participatory level with the mutual acceleration of opening. That is love in the sense of agape, agapic love, which I find this definition absolutely beautiful, and it resonates with me deeper than only the propositional level. So probably I'm biased toward that, but I really like this conception of things, and it's also plausible because multiple research tend to this explanation. But the thing is that, so yeah, by definition, probably you don't incarnate enough love to know what it is by being in it or belonging in this world or this situation or this co-creation of agent arena love. So yeah, I would tend to agree with what you said. It's probably you don't have enough knowledge of what is love, but I think it's not propositional knowledge. It's knowing by being. But towards the next question with the evil and the good, it's like we always have this idea of death, the death penalty. But basically, we can. I don't want to be reductive because it's not only that, but the question that if you kill someone, would it save other people is one of the questions that we can ask ourselves in the polemic or in the debate of the death penalty, for example. And it's really hard to solve this problem because to kill someone that's kind of a transformative experience. At least that's what it is accounted as. So many people can say lightly that, oh yeah, we just have to kill this person, but okay, but who is going to do that? Are you? And it goes back to the same thing. Like propositionally, you can have theories about we should kill this person. You can try to have a probabilistic approach that, yeah, you have 70% of chance to save 60 million people if you kill this person at this moment. There are also science fiction sceneries of movies, about this. If you can go back in time, what will change if you kill that person? That's the scenario of Terminator, basically. So we kind of have this discussion, but first is combinatorially explosives, that what we see in Back to the Future or Terminator is like, in Terminator is more straightforward. It's like you change something, yeah, it goes, it can go astray, but it seems it goes the way that you want it to go if you go back in the past and you kill that thing. But as it's combinatorially explosive and the probability of interactions of the element are infinite, in Back to the Future, when you change something, the consequences are completely not what at all you were expecting, and it's reduced. Of course, it's reduced because you cannot even encompass the change that it would make. So it's on the sports journal that fell, and so someone became rich and things. But we can also account that he could have lost all this money right away, or many things could have happened, and so the future would have been also different in the scenario of Back to the Future. Sorry, I'm losing myself in this thread of thought, but to me, yeah, the death penalty has something to do with this thinking, this propositional thinking at the propositional level first, it's really, really hard to model what will happen in the future. Even if we tend to have, we have mathematical models which are not regulated by, it's not linear models, you know, it's not a function like ax plus bx plus c. It's more functions, it's more in the power law. So it's it is nonlinear, and they have mathematical models to predict where will be the next terrorist attack. They have mathematical equations to predict if someone who has already had a criminal record is likely to recidive, I think we say also in English, or to reiterate the bad behavior. But it's not perfect. It tends to be above the average, above the random. So good thing, but it's not perfect. And the second thing with the death penalty thing, but it basically also reminds me about the prisoner dilemma. About the prisoner dilemma?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the prisoner dilemma is basically the same thing. As, how can you be sure that the
Oh wait,
person
actually,
you
what is
will
the prisoner?
reciprocate?
What is the prisoner dilemma again? I forget.
Okay. I'm really not good at explaining things like this, but the thing that if you give like your accomplice to the you both have done wrong things, let's say, if you give the other guy to the police, you avoid the worst punishment. If he does the same for you, he avoids the worst punishment. If you both deny, none of you gets caught. But if you if you give him to the police and he doesn't give you to the police, he gets the full punishment, you get nothing. But if you both do this, you have, of course, reduction pain, but also you can say, okay, I will deny, but how do you know that he will deny? And if he doesn't deny, you get the full punishment, and he doesn't. Okay, so that's
Yeah. I remember this now. Yeah, for
there
sure.
are multiple versions. There are multiple versions. This is a negative version. This is avoidance of punishment, but there is also a positive version with biggest reward. But as humanity tends to be more avoidant of pain than rich seeking, we so probably this formulation was accurate enough, I hope. So it has also something to do with that, I guess, because you cannot be sure that the other one will behave the way that you predicted. So that's on the propositional side, but on the participatory level and on the perspectival, okay, we need to kill this person, but who will do it? And yeah, and that's another story, because it will be sculpted. It will transform your personality, basically. It doesn't transform completely your personality, but it's a transformative event to kill someone. And the other thing is that I've read something or saw something a few days ago. I need to find it and send it to you. Maybe you can tell me what you think about it. Probably we won't do it this evening because we won't have the time, but you can look at it whenever you want. It's the is the theory about that we are kind of a civilized species. We have civilization because of our capacity for execution. This theory is funded on the principle that if we are not able to be together and to reunite, even if we are not agreeing on many things, if we are not able to reunite to overthrow a tyrant, we get dominated by the most violent individual in terms of Darwinian selection. The most tyrannical and violent and physically strong will always dominate. But we are a gregarious species, and so we tend to collaborate with each other to overthrow a common enemy. And that's something really gathering people. And on a Darwinian perspective, it would explain why we are not always mastered by the people who are the strongest physically or the most threatening. And probably it can also account for the explanation of why we are led by the people with the most leadership skill, if we can phrase it this way, even if I'm not sure to understand fully what the meaning of is. But if we say leadership is a social skill and not necessarily a good thing, not necessarily inherently good. It can be used, leadership can be used in many ways, even doing atrocities, but the guy who lead now have a good capacity of leadership rather than the guy who is the most violent. Sorry, I've talked way too much and went a little astray in my explanation, but I think all these problems are linked.
Mm-hmm. They are. Yeah, you have the advantage of being very interesting when you talk, so you can talk for long periods of time and never lose my interest.
Thank you.
I to try to highlight, I think maybe the underlying disagreement we have here is actually one that goes to Vervaeke's model, because I agree with Vervaeke to the point of his description of the way things are, that there are ways of knowing that are propositional and participatory. Um, what I am resistant to or think is not the most functional way of viewing it is the prescription that seems implicit and explicit, as far as you're saying, in what he's saying, or the way what the models indicate, which is that there is a necessity to make sure that things are not grounded propositionally, because then they miss this whole other landscape. The reason why I am not in favor of this perspective is because what I think then things ultimately ground out in is the subjective human experience. Because I think that things have to, it's an either or dichotomy. It's like one is primary or the other is primary. Either a proposition is primary, or or uh, participation and being and knowing what it's like is primary. And the reason for that is, so like, you could argue, well, no, we're just saying that it's one or the other. But if you're saying that there are ultimately things which cannot be understood in any other way other than just actually being a part of those things, then what that means is that the proposition is limited in its scope, and the being is sort of ultimate in its scope. And so you give this example of, love not being able to, you can't propositionally detail why multiple partners is not good. And my response to this is only to give a set of propositions that does detail exactly why multiple partners doesn't work in a logical format. So the proposition I'll give for that is basically that let's define love. Love at its romantic, beautiful, the thing we like about love is when two humans love each other on that human level. They don't love something about the human. They love
Mm.
the, the their spirit.
Yeah, what I think what Vervaeke is making as a point is that is the spirit of accelerating, of disclosure, of opening in between is the it has something to do, I think, with the spirit of play that also Jordan Peterson is talking about. It's the spirit of participating in the co-creation of our agent arena relationship. That's why I think that is so and when we phrase it propositionally, we tend to reduce this to, it's like asking, why do you love someone? Oh, I love him because he has big lips, or I love that. No, 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 no. This is propositional bullshit, and I think it's bullshit because if you take in combination works that are not only necessarily done by, but brought to the light by Sarah Hill on evolutionistic mating strategies for men and women, with neurosciences, with Balan Jalal, and I also mentioned, I don't remember the writer, but I can give you a thing. I've done a master memory or a dissertation about the anatomy of action and consciousness of acting back ago, and they were some neurosciences that said, we are not really sure that we are not doing the things like almost automatically, or not automatically, but ineffably. Like we choose by heuristic, and then the propositional, it's like the propositional is here, and I don't like it because it's too reductive, but as I can caricature it by saying, okay, you have your heuristic, your perspectival, your participatory that is choosing, and then you rationalize it propositionally afterward. And that's interesting because Balanjal was proposing some experiments, really interesting experiment about it with the patients who were in denial of their disability to move some of their limbs, for example, and they were in a denial, in a productive denial, that they produce false propositional propositions. So yeah, there are some experiments who tend to show that we cannot rely so much on the propositional, even our own proposition.
It
Because
is possible.
yeah,
Oh, sorry for cutting you off.
sorry, it's just like I would like to finish just by saying that Vervaeke would say that you cannot lie to yourself because you know your subjective objective truth. You know your subjective truth, so you cannot lie to yourself. But you can bullshit yourself. You can distract yourself from what is truly meaningful by making something hyper salient and being like blinded by this hypersalience. And this is there is a bias that is called there are multiple biases, but one of the biases is a bias of persistence, that you continue to invest in the thing. It's fueled by the sunk cost bias and the confirmatory bias, confirmation. Sorry, I finished.
I'm very excited to be talking about this stuff because I have these disagreements with Vervaeke. So even this idea, so it's nice to be able to kind of work these out a bit. But so this idea, even also of not being able to lie to yourself, I disagree with this one too. I think that you can actually lie to yourself. An example of this is, and I think this is kind of what the basis of magic and sorcery kind of is it's lying that manifests something. So if you tell yourself a lie, and lots of people do this, you tell yourself a lie that I am confident in a social situation. You tell yourself that lie, and then it makes it kind of true because you go out, you act confident, and then you start feeling confident, kind of fake it till you make it. Uh, Whereas the perfectly truthful person will derive their confidence from their competence entirely. They'll only be confident if they think that they are, um, if they are the person in the room that has something to contribute, versus somebody who practices this magical conjuring doesn't have to have anything of value, and they will think, oh, confidence is something which is gained through pure will, which it's actually kind of not if you start to see through that. So that's one thing I would push back on. The Balland um, analysis of maybe it was somebody had a corpus callosum cut, and then um, they were asked to explain why this part of their hand, which they didn't have access to, as part of their brain, was doing something, and they, maybe it was something inexplicable and they were just making up reasons. I would hypothesize that the large percentage of people, and therefore probably people who are picked for these studies, are people who practice this kind of thing all the time. That there's a select group of people who don't create things, but the vast majority of people do create things. And so if you measure a certain amount of people, because it is a set amount of people, it's not like a vast sample of people that they were able to run these very intrusive psychological studies on. It may just be that they always picked people who had a ability to create things.
The RCT, randomized control trials are really, really strict. It requires a lot of money, especially for this kind of measurements. So I think it's well done. We can find the studies about this and try to evaluate the methodology, but I think they have controlled for many conditions. I don't know if they pass psychometrics tests, but the condition was mostly they had a trauma, like a brain trauma that were disabling a part of their right frontal lobe or their left frontal lobe. And that's how they done. So there are always the possibility. I agree with you. There is always a possibility that there is a selection bias in the studies that doesn't represent the full range of the population, and probably and maybe it happens sometimes. I cannot say that because it can happen, to me and you, and it's not your fault. But if they are only victims of car accident, for example, we could say that maybe people who are involved in a car accident are more prone to bullshit themselves, to have hyper confidence in their driving skills. But it's not really true, because many of the victims of the car accident are not the careless drivers. They are the victims of the careless drivers. And so they are not always careless drivers themselves. So maybe it's not so much, but I don't think it has been controlled statistically on the RCTs. So we need to read the methodology of the RCT to see there are selection bias. But to get funds in RCTs that are not pharmaceutical, it's not pharmaceutical. That's something you have to take in consideration, that the biggest fundings for randomized control trials are through pharmaceutical companies. They're the biggest fundings. So if you want to have a funding to make research on something else, like exploring if people deceive themselves, if they have impairment in the thing that will not really directly be able to be translated in therapy for them, you need to have a solid methodology and to account for many possible biases and to control them. So I'd say that, yeah, there still be a possibility of a selection bias, but it's not the most probable.
I would think that it would be the most probable in this specific case. I don't think either one of us have looked at the actual study, but you're talking about a very rare condition, whereas the corpus callosum is severed.
Oh no, this experiment was not on the corpus callosum sever. Yeah, it happens. This is very rare, but this experiment was on trauma on the left forehead hemisphere or right frontal lobe hemisphere. It wasn't the corpus callosum that was cut. It was an impairment on certain
But
part.
but even given that though, it's not like a general study where you can basically just pick as many people as you want and have them participate in the study. You have to have a very select group of people that have this injury and are willing to
Yes.
participate in the study. I I didn't even know that this was a study. I thought it was just an observation. So I didn't know that they had done a statistical large amount of
Oh
people.
yeah.
This is a statistically
Yeah,
okay.
I think it was talking about it. Let's say that for the next time we talk on this, I will find the recites. I will find the control trials, but I think that Balangel, I'm not sure because it's a long time I've seen these lectures, but I think he's talking about randomized control
Okay, interesting. Um,
or crossovers, because it's not only a randomized control, or it's quasi experimental. Probably it's quasi experimental, but I need to find these articles. Talk more about that.
okay. Yeah, yeah. Um, Now, well, let me just put the cap on the one example that I was of the a love, right? Because, you know, like you were saying, like it there, yeah, it's this voluntary opening, this mutual reciprocatory opening of each other. I would say that propositionally, it seems that propositionally, if you're going to define love as not liking specific attributes of them, but actually loving their essence, then the proposition would follow that if you were going to sleep with random partners, you therefore must not love them. There must not be a true love because why would you choose to go to random people if there was something about their essence that you loved? So it seems definitionally true love can only exist if a person is sort of deeply monogamous.
Yes, I think that it is the case. I think that, and probably Dr. Vervaeke would agree with that. Is like what we're describing, that when we have a lot of partners is the having mode, not the being mode. You're not co-creating agent arena. You're creating your agent arena, and you're using others like object for your satisfaction. You can also have satisfaction to bring them, like sexual arousal satisfaction or pleasure, but it's not really love, especially when you tend to have this behavior of multiple partners as a proxy to feel loved, because it's more an addiction. And to the opposite, that's another big big statement, but I think I believe in that. Like the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is addiction. Because the agapic love is it's selfless by essence, because you're not constricting yourself in the expand of the other one. You are both constricting a meta agentarina relationship, or whatever you want to call it. You co-constructing also your a meta identity by blending a part of your identity with the other one in order to create that super identity. Even if you keep a part of your identity and the partner keeps a part of this identity, and that's probably why it's so traumatic when there is a breakup with someone that you truly love and not just a one-night partner. It's because you have co-created, you have committed, participated with your deep identity and being and sense of belonging in that new identity that is shaped through this reciprocal acceleration of opening. And when it's not there anymore, you lose a part of your identity, you lose a part of your sense of belonging. The word, the conception of the world, of your world, of your immediate agentarina relationship has been dissolved, especially when it's comes from cheating. And that I think it's totally coherent with what Jordan Peterson said about that. When the the worst thing is not to have, like, okay, with your partner you're not really agreeing anymore and you're saying, yeah, I see that we're not go along well with each other like we used to. And it's more like when you cheat, or when you've been, like, in both sense, when you cheated, when you've been cheated on. It's harder for the person to discover that the reality that of where they belonged is not real. It's not what they thought it was. This belonging, they didn't belong in the world, like the world they belong to. Vervaeke said that the word you belong to doesn't exist anymore. And it's even worse because it's taking away your present, but it's taking away your past for a certain amount of time. Because if your wife or your husband started cheating like 6 months ago, you don't know in what you lived for 6 months. For example, if it's 10 years, it's even worse. It dissolves your identity. It's traumatic. So I would say that no, I don't think that the the reciprocal opening, or the definition of love, by which John Vervaeke tends to put forward, is not an advocating for having multiple partner. It's in the contrary.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I was outlining a proposition that, not that he was saying that multiple partners is okay, but that he was saying that the only way that you can derive some critical moral truths is through kind of like experience. It seems like Vervaeke's model, and or what yeah, it seems like Vervaeke's model is saying that some critically important moral factors cannot be deduced propositionally and must be deduced basically experientially. And so this is the idea that I'm pushing back against, saying that, okay, well, if certain things can only be deduced sort of experientially, you have this danger of a floating morality, which is kind of based on people's feelings, essentially. And so
Yeah.
this is why I explained only like a proposition for uh why love must be monogamous propositionally. That's why I explained that, not because I thought he was saying the other, but because I thought he was saying that you couldn't deduce it propositionally. And then also you presented this example of sort of capital punishment, and maybe it's not necessary to do the same thing twice, which is to give a set of propositions to define how to deal with the situation. But I could also do the same thing for capital punishment, basically saying that, like, yes, the best thing to do is to keep people alive, but in some situations you sort of can't, and so you have to make those judgments.
I think I would agree with what you say to a certain extent. Otto von Bismarck used to say that it's translated from the German, so probably it's not really accurate, but he said that the stupid person learns from his mistakes, the clever person learns from the mistakes of others. So I would say maybe propositional thinking is an acceptation of primary, if we take the theories of different brains, the archaeocortex, then the paleocortex, then the neocortex. Where the archaeocortex is I really caricaturate this. I oversimplify it, and it's not really correct, but it's the stress brain, then the fight, flight, freeze. Then you have the paleocortex, which is more emotional, it's more heuristic, and then you have the neocortex, which is the cortex which we simplify into brain cortex right now. This is especially the frontal lobe, with allows you to do all this computation, and it's more frontoparietal than only frontal, but and with other part also. We cannot. We always oversimplify with with neurological stuff, but the fact is, you can do it by inference. But one big problem I had in my practice, I'm a public health physician, so I'm working mostly on the health of populations and of groups of people. So I have to study the patterns of behavior. And what I can tell you is that telling someone that smoking is not good for them doesn't make them stop. Having the ineffable experience, transformative experience of something higher has a tremendous more amount of chance to make you stop smoking. It can be religious, and I need to find this research paper, or I don't even know if it was published, but it was a guy from a university in the center of the US that used psychedelics, especially psilocybin, for stopping smoking, and the results were excellent, because psilocybin tends to facilitate, if it's well used, tends to facilitate the entry into an ineffable experience. And so I'd say that these pieces of evidence tend to make me adhere to the idea that for some people propositional is enough, but you need to transform it into something cognitive, not only cognitive. You need to embody this idea and make it yours, and make it like your credo. Because if you don't, it only stays propositional in your mind, and yeah, it's an idea, yeah, I know that smoking is not good, but I still smoke. So you need to embody it in a certain way. It can come first, the information can come from the propositional, but if you don't embody it by changing your frame, changing your perspective, and embodying it by living it, participating in it, you cannot turn it really into a behavior, consistent behavior. It stays an idea.
I would add to the neural model that I've proposed, basically shadow integration. Freud had this idea. Yeah. Well, Freud had this. So yes, that's Jungian. Freud had this idea of the death urge. And so if I mix these two ideas together, this Freudian death urge and Jungian shadow integration, I have, a feeling that lots of things that people do are actually in their detriment, and it's purposeful, and it's a part of their shadow that's leading to do that. If you have a sample of people who are smoking, those people in modern society are already the set of people that have heard that smoking was bad and still did it. And so it's not like you have a sample of people who never heard smoking was bad. And okay, you do actually, because when smoking first started, actually, they told people smoking was bad and people didn't stop smoking. So that's wrong. But I think that the even given that information that countered what I was saying, I feel like the effect on people's bodies is the thing that they're wanting. So smoking kills you essentially, and I think that that's actually what people are in their shadow desiring when they smoke. People eat junk food. I say the same thing. I think people actually want to sedate themselves and slowly put themselves closer to the grave by doing that, but it's part of their shadow. And so it's not that there's a propositional inability to pass into certain people's minds. It's that there's a lack of connection with their deeper self, is what I would say.
So there is a theory about this, about do I don't know who wrote this. I can give you the reference. Derived on bullshit. So it's a book on bullshit. It's been published a few decades ago already. And there is a proposition now that you are probably afraid of death, but the main mechanism that could account to the fact that you still destroy yourself tiny bit by tiny bit, is not because something inside you tries to destroy you, but you have this psychological capacity to deceive yourself, to not see and to not live with enough to have the proposition that you will go to the grave with this is not salient enough in your relevance realization. So that's an interesting theory, I think. But I'd agree with you that people tend to have this behaviors, this addictive behavior, and it can be external substances that you take to numb yourself. It can numb yourself like psychomotorily, like with the physically, but it can numb yourself psychologically. Like cocaine, for example, is increasing your heart rate, is increasing your strength, capability, resistance of pain, and thing. But it increases your resistance of pain by numbing a part of the things. So you take cocaine, so you're numb for certain things, even if you're more excited in some other part of your physiology. But yeah, it's called most of this is called in psychotrauma theories. It's called in English It is des comportements dissociative behavior, let's say. So you tend to dissociate you tend to provoke, you tend to help dissolve your sense of belonging in this shitty world situation, agent arena relationship that you're in now, and you're reducing your agency. So you reduce the anxiety of that computationally explosive ways where you are going to the grave. So you're reducing this pathways to it, even
Wait,
making it
what do you mean by
closer,
that?
you're
That
reducing it.
that combinatory explosive way to the grave. That's the last part I didn't understand. You're reducing the amount of paths you have to the grave. You're simplifying it.
Yeah, because, and I think you can find it in Jung too. It's been so much time that I haven't read Jung. I need to read, but there's quite amount of pages to read back. But the shadow and the integration of shadow, I don't even remember if it's in this part, but you have the thing that what brings you anxiety is an overwhelming amount of unknown that can be dangerous. So the trade-off of reducing this unknown possibility to a known possibility towards direction, because you know you're going to the grave, but having more certainty, even if the grave is closer, is it your psyche that tells you, or that murmur you inside you, that it's preferable than, and you know that's basically the argument that your prefrontal left cortex will say to you, and they will rationalize it like, oh, we have to die from something.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
smoke, but tomorrow I can cross the street and die. Yeah, so it makes me think about it.
That's one example of where the actual urge to die is hidden. Some people probably would, like you're saying, deny it. They'd say, "No, I don't want to die. I just want to, live a happy life." But why is it making you happy?
I just
Because
want
it's
not to suffer right now.
right. I I think it's also possible that the the imposed desire to die could also be externally imposed. So somebody is hanging out with maybe a group of people. The group of people doesn't want this person to be hanging out with them. They don't like them. And so what this person feels is this sort of social feeling of just leave us, which is equivalent to, if enough people do that to somebody, it's like go away from
Isolation,
existence.
rejection,
Right.
yeah, that's one of the worst feelings, and that's one of the most, like, isolation, and one of the 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 the, the heaviest predictor of mental health issues. Yeah, no doubt.
That makes sense. Did we, by the way, cover um your model? Because I remember you said you wanted to hear my model of morality first. I think we maybe implicitly covered yours, but was it
Yes,
explicit? Okay.
probably because of course I don't have an integrated model. I don't have, because myself, as I told you when we started this conversation, I'm not clear enough in my own feelings about the sense I derive from the world, the meaning in my life, not the meaning of my life, because probably it's ineffable, but the meaning in my life, I'm not clear enough with that. I'm still sorting it out. I'm not an accomplished man. And I don't even think I'm an awakened man in a Buddha sense of things.
I
So,
feel like we're in a very philosophical age when a doctor goes, "I am not an accomplished man."
oh, medical studies are not really about. Oh, I told that to my sister yesterday afternoon. I told to my sister, you know, with my studies, I've been a good student, especially in some places in medicine. You learn a lot of propositional things. You have to keep them in mind. You have to memorize a huge amount of propositional knowing. And the thing that I learned to I can find the message exactly, because that's what I really felt at this moment. It's like comme un bon élève, j'ai passé probablement trop de temps à ingurgiter du savoir, pas assez à cultiver la sagesse. As a good student, I spent probably too much time acquiring knowledge, not enough time cultivating wisdom. And now I'm stuck. I'm stuck with all that I know. And sometimes it's contradictory, and sometimes it doesn't align with what I feel. My propositional knowing, my skills, my technical knowing, my perspectival knowing, and my participatory knowing are not properly aligned. The vertical religio is not properly done. It impairs a lot my horizontal religio too. I think I have a lot of social interactions because I'm really pro-social and extrovert, but do I have a profound vertical and horizontal religio? No. I still need to figure it out. And I don't need to read more. Probably I need to write more and reflect more on what I can propositionally formulate, because it will maybe help me have insight. Writing things will not, it's not an insight in itself, but probably it can bring me insight that I will feel deeply in me and will help me find some meaning.
I would have thought you would have said meditate, but I guess I don't know what your thoughts about meditation are. But like Carl Jung, somebody who I would say is famously really in touch with his religio, where the religio is properly in tune, the propositional and the internal states. It seems like what he did to get there was probably some kind of meditation or just observing internal states or something. It wasn't through his writing that he learned it
Yeah.
as much as sort of allowing the archetypes to spill forth from his unconscious.
Yes. That probably true, and probably John Vervaeke would probably agree on this. Like, meditative practices are a big deal when you are thinking about getting insight, higher state of consciousness, meta-perspectival wisdom.
What
Like, but the thing with that is that I think first I need to put my propositional landmarks on piece of paper to extract it from my mind and being less persecuted by my own superego probably that tells me that no, you need to keep all that at the same time in your work memory, and but the work memory cannot remember all that. It's putting a tremendous amount of stress. So I first need to put the landmarks, all the relevant landmarks that can come to my mind on a piece of paper. That's why I draw this sort of meta schema, flow charts with my thoughts, and I try to articulate them this way because it's soothing my stress of having to memorize all of that and keeping all of that in my working memory. And but yes, I need more meditative practices. I've been doing a lot of this in 2018, 2019, 2020, 21. But after I got caught up in my habits and my thoughts and my occupations and my doctor thesis in medicine and things, and I stopped doing meditative practices. But you know what? It's really, really important, and it's even more important. We will go back to the, war medicine aspect and a very operational aspect of life. I think the people, the mindfulness practices, if we can summarize them this way, are so useful when you are able to do them in a context of stressful, life-threatening event. It helps you so much.
True.
Keeping focus and keeping you alive or the ones you care about. And when you talk with some special forces or some military guys that knew the battlefield and had special sort of trainings with that, some of their practices, like in France, there is a current of potential optimization practices. Many of them are based on mindfulness practices because it enhances your flow state. It's helping you entering in the flow state. It's enhancing your capability to have insight and to effortlessly have probably not the fittest, but a fit heuristic in the situation.
Curious what you perceive that you don't have that you want to have from this integration of religio. And additionally, when you say that you don't want to have to hold all these propositions in your mind, my feeling of the mind, because I've sort of went through some very extreme psychological experiences, my experience is that there is no there is no need for any kind of stress to hold on to or anything like that. That that the mind is sort of entirely capable of remembering the things it needs to remember that are important, and that any process of like sort of holding on to something has more potentiality to undercut the unconscious's ability to correctly orientate yourself.
Yes, yeah, I agree 100%. It's like it's not it's not something healthy that my mind is doing. It's something that I try to change. Something that goes back to the the death penalty, the prisoner's dilemma, Like probably I don't trust my mind enough. So I don't know if it will give up on me or when I need to recall this skill or this knowledge. So I try to have it always in my mind and keep it at sight. That's it. Yeah.
I had
Right.
an
I
experience
think you're
of
right.
what felt basically exactly like ego death, where I came to this point where it was even a bit stronger than that, where I felt like I needed to hold on to like the thinking function, like I needed to just like keep thinking about things. I needed to um I also felt like I needed to have some kind of like grounding that orientated my mind. I was like, I need to have something that makes my mind orientated. And then when I sort of let go of the requirement of that, I had this like very profound, like I just sort of like blinked out of existence. And then there was like this goop in my eyes, and I felt this like tremendous, you know, inner peace that was like extremely profound for that period of time. And then it kind of like dissipated, but then like kind of returned. But like I feel like that kind of holding on to like what your mind is doing and then sort of the letting go of that is basically the is exactly precisely what ego death is.
Um, that's really interesting what you said. Like holding. I think I will remember it without writing it, but and let it go. And maybe it's not. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not literate enough about this. Can you precise what you mean? I think I see what you mean by ego death, but to me, ego death will be the total dissolution of your
Mm,
belonging to this world, and so it's complete break of frame.
right.
You have kind of a meta frame, like when you take psilocybin and um, and you open to, like, you think you can comprehend things from the universe, and things are it's a flow state, and so does it what you call ego death, because ego death I think is also used in psychotrauma things, even if I think that neurologically it's not so far from one another, because you have also this kind of, you doesn't belong anymore to your body, and some victims of horrible things can see themselves on the third person. It's mediated. We tend to try to see how chemically, what is the chemical flip side, because to me, the mind body, I'm probably I'd say I'm probably a monist, but so I think mind body is the same thing. um, but but I cannot explain it other way than with a dualist approach, that mind and body are separated things.
Mhm.
But to me, it's two sides of the same coin. What you can see in what you can feel in the mind, we can see it on the neurochemical level. It doesn't mean that I don't know, and I don't want to be pedant in saying that, oh yeah, I think because some evidence show that the matters precedes the mind, so chemicals explain the thing, and having a Richard Dawkins approach that you are just a bunch of stuff. You're just a bunch of cells and of neurochemicals. No, I think both is two sides of the same coin. So yeah, sorry, it's a parenthesis, but I think it has something to do with that too in trauma, the dissolution of the ego means the dissolution of the belonging of the here right now. And you don't have identity anymore. You're like floating in space. I don't know if it's a visual analogy to that, but
Yeah, I had one of the dialogoses. I'm not sure if you saw Caden's dialogoses, but he one of them was about exactly ego death and or egolessness or the definition of that because those two definitions because your clinical definition comes from that place where if the ego dies, you're not there anymore. But there's a more
you're there, but you're not you're not so much in your body.
yes, exactly. But there's a more pop scientific definition of ego death, which supposes that people can sort of have an ego death experience, and then I guess it's similar in many ways, but they have an ego death experience, and then they go through that. So I guess the reason why I said it's like an ego death is because of the um pattern that's similar with psychedelics. So people describe this that there's this feeling of like having to hold on to it and then holding on to it so much. And then when you like let go or can no longer hold on to it anymore, what happens is there's the realization of like, oh, it's okay now. Like that you've moved past some ego. I think about the word ego. This is actually the way I think about the word ego. I think about it as like structure or software. So it's like you've moved. And so like that was the experience I had where it was like this tremendous gripping fear I had until that exact moment where I kind of let go and it was just like poof, I was just like gone where it felt psychedelic in that way.
Maybe, yeah, maybe the ego, the definition of the ego that we are talking about right now is not so much the Freudian definition of the ego, but more a definition that is akin to a sense of self.
Yeah, I mean,
I
my way
wouldn't
of
be sure
thinking
about
about
it, but
yeah, it is similar to that. I think about I think about ego as sort of a construction of something that is not in base reality because like if you have a sense of self that means it's not like absolute reality. It's something which is like only local to yourself. And so like I think about it, and this is not a clinical way of thinking about it, but I think about if somebody, let's say, has internal dissonance, they have cognitive dissonance, they think something X and something Y. So they can't both be true, but they hold both these things, right? This is a cognitive dissonance. And when they and so I would describe that as an ego. It's like something which exists only in themselves. And when they see the logic of it and that thing breaks, then I would say that's a minor ego death. That ego that was holding the thing broke to the reality of logic itself. That's the way I think about those terms. It's not the clinical definite the clinical way of thinking about it
no,
though.
but you read the Maps of Meaning from Jordan Peterson.
I took his lectures but didn't
Okay.
read the book.
Um, I haven't taken the lectures on the Peterson Academy. I have taken I've seen
Same.
the lectures recorded in 2017 and things.
Yep.
Not really called the Maps of Meaning, but referring to this. But when you read the book, The Map of Meanings, you have some schema he drawn that when you have something that challenges the vision of your world, the vision that you have, your maybe your theory of everything or a part of it, um, you you have two things to do. Either it's a minor thing, and so you can incorporate that element and put it in a place in on your theory of on your presupposition on how the world is, and or you can part of or all your model dissolves into chaos,
Hmm.
and then you have to rebuild it, integrating it in a more integrated manner. Sorry, I don't have better words to say that.
My like slight disagreement with the Peterson model because of my personal experience, because I actually had this so at this exact time where I described what I called the ego death. I had this so I sort of felt this kind of ego dissolvement where I sort of went into chaos, pure chaos, which was just pure terror. And I thought, I need to hold on to something to like rebuild back my cognition because I had devolved into terror. And I'm like, this is clearly a disorder. This is a really bad state. And then when I went to, when I thought, okay, well, I'm going to find out what is true to rebuild back my cognition, I've devolved into this state of depression, which was worse than the fear. And so I thought, I don't like this. So I went back to the having no model and just kind of being in this place of chaos. And then eventually it was sort of in acceptance of the chaos and the horror that I went through it. But so that's why I have a personal experience which makes me disagree with the model, basically, the Peterson model, that you need to sort of um, you need to have a model of the world because I my understanding is that your mind will always have a model of the world, and what you think of as the thing you hold on to as the basis of your reality is sort of a false, it's sort of a Tower of Babel, like a false castle in the way of your actual consciousness. And so like anything that like a person thinks, well, I need this so that my whole mind can have something built on top of it, is not something you need to hold on to, because there's like literally no way to let go enough that your mind actually dissolves into chaos.
In what you have no way to dissolve enough? No, you have no way to attain the fact that your mind dissolved into chaos.
There's no way to let go of axioms or beliefs or
In
things to a point where your mind devolves into chaos. Like your mind actually can't let go of like, like
which state?
which state?
I mean, oh, you mean with the Peterson's model where you have a construction of.
Yeah, because like so like Peterson said that he, during the Cold War, he had this feeling of this need to understand something because he was feeling this sort of imposed fear of the world about the impending chaos. And so um there was this need to build, and he even said this, I went to a live thing. He said he had this desire to solve a problem. And so therefore he was building this model. And what I'm saying is that there's actually no need cognitively to have a model that you construct for any need. No need to have a model constructed for the sake of sanity or for the sake of like, solving a There's like no need to um it's just like where I disagree with Peterson, because it seems like Dr. Jordan Peterson is saying that like in order to function in the world, it's like a slight difference. It's like in order to function in the world, you need to have built a like conscious model of reality. And my difference with what he's saying is that it's like impossible not to do that. Um, it's not something you need to go like, oh, I need to make sure I hold on to some things that are true. I'm saying that it's literally impossible to let go of things to where you go. So like having said that, like I think that if you do let go of models of reality, there there are it's like, you know, the thickness of a veil sort of gets thinner, and you start to be able to experience more spiritual things, which uh, result in the experience of crazy seeming phenomena in this
Mm,
spiritual world.
yeah.
But so like that's where people describe essentially that, like needing to have some kind of built model, because they kind of once the structure dissipates, they have more access to, you know, other things which they normally wouldn't have access to, which makes them feel like it's something crazy going on. But
Yeah. Okay. What comes to my mind right now is I don't know if it's what Dr. Peterson really meant through that model, because this model of your conception of the world is not fully conscious. And sometimes you have glimpses of things that of this model that comes to your mind because you encounter something that is a monster, is something that you don't understand because it doesn't fit in the preconceived spaces of your model that is, for the biggest part, unconscious. And you are aware that this space in your model is lacking because you cannot fit this new entity in your model. And then you become conscious that you had a model for start.
Right.
But I don't want to put words in the mouth of all these professors that are absolutely geniuses compared to what I can be. And so, but that would be my thought about this model of, you have the model of the world and it can disintegrate into chaos, because this model doesn't presuppose that this model is conscious all the time. And that's why you can encounter a monster, and that's why encountering a monster is an ego threat, finally. So it's an ego threat. It challenges your life because it doesn't fit.
Yeah, I mean, when I analyze though the entire Peterson model, which by the way, I think it's like entirely true. It's just that, so like when I analyze the model, he describes so that the importance of stories or Jungian archetypes. These are the important things that people need in order to, so like the hero, this hero story, the
Yeah.
story of how to be brave. This is an important story that people need to face reality correctly. And then, you know, when he talks about nihilism, he'll say that these stories are an antidote to the chaos induced by nihilism. My like reframing of what he's saying is to say that basically, in some sense, if you don't have it, it's like, so the story is the antidote to the bad story in some kind of way. It like goes in here. And so nihilism is not actually caused from having no structure of reality. It's from having a partial structure of reality. Nihilism is caused from this mix between thinking things sort of need to have meaning and not being able to find it the whole way. To where, like, what I'm saying is, if a person goes the full way with letting go of mental structures, nihilism also doesn't exist, because it itself is sort of an ego construct that exists. And so the you know, the critical shift at the base of, and I like you have, I think any philosopher in our age that doesn't cite Jordan Peterson is uneducated. He's a master of our times like no other. Um, my feeling, though, is that there is this implicit and endless and needless chase in the model of like needing to have something to orientate your framework. So like what I'm saying is, like, if you um have, you know, no necessity to ground your reality or understand things, that itself is enough to alleviate all the problems that were there, and that it's like, so Jordan Peterson is like, we have a structure that's very powerful, very deep, and very much works. And I'm saying that's an antidote to bad structure, not a replacement, or not even as fully powerful as like no structure and just pure perception of reality.
It's also philosophical theories, because if the reality is material, if existence precedes essence, it's different than when the essence precedes existence.
Yeah, that's a good
It
point.
changes the frame, because you can say that maybe if the essence precedes existence, then if you don't have this superstructure of or hierarchy, you are by definition in nihilism. But if the existence precedes essence, and therefore things just exist and we superimpose our model on it, would mean that would it validate your claim?
Um, I view both orientations of existence and essence um as as valid in the metaphysics I'm describing, because if basically, also I'll say this, so in half an hour I got to go because I got to teach a piano lesson. Um, but whether or not existence or essence comes first, the form or the thing itself, um, we can only, again, we can only really think about forms and things. We can only think about forms as they map onto reality, and forms as they can be abstracted from multiple things in these kind of forms. And so it it's like, and part of those forms is that at the base of them is logic. And logic, again, so people can argue like maybe logic is something which is a human construct, maybe math is a human construct. Um, but what you can't argue is that that there's something else we can do. And so whether or not logic is real, whether or not the Platonic forms are real, whether or not base reality is the only thing there is and everything else is imaginal, it
Mm.
doesn't matter, because the only things that we can effectively conceptualize are forms and logic. And so because of the structure of logic, and this is something that I experienced because of not having a grounding framework, what I found very, very experientially was just that logic grounds things out. Uh, You know, the fact that things in conception cannot be the thing and not the thing in some productive framework way. You can, so like, as far as like what you build from, of course, when you imagine and like are creative, you can do dream-like thinking, which puts unlike things together. But when you're thinking about reality as such, there's this constraint on, because of the law of non-contradiction, which grounds everything in that. And um which is where I say that, because you said, does the form, does the essence preceding the existence mean that it would be nihilistic? I'm saying it wouldn't, because what you see at the base of everything is the undeniable truth of logic. Whether or not it's actually true doesn't matter, but that's all you can see. And so it leads you to some form of meaning in logic itself.
Okay, I understand, but I felt that nihilism, the supposition of nihilism was that it's not that there is nothing in essence, it's that there is no hierarchy in this essence of things.
Yeah, but no, so like what nihilism is though, it's not it's not the absence of a framework or the absence of a hierarchy or the absence, it's actually its own hierarchy. Nihilism says that nothing matters. It's an assertion of something. And so when you let go of like all models, it doesn't ground in nihilism because nihilism is a very specific story that has to have strong support. What it leads to is actually a place of not knowing. It's like I don't know if nihilism is true, or I don't know if theism is true, or like, but that's not the same thing as nihilism because nihilism is I know nothing matters. What I'm describing is we don't know.
Yeah, I don't think nihilism is something material. We cannot say that it exists or it doesn't exist. It's a concept. But nihilo exists. Like, okay, the total absence of things is maybe something that exist, but is nihilism is a current, is a construct of mind, is a way to see things. It's not.
Nihilism is
But the real the real question is that is if I understand what you're saying is that nihilism could also be the actual state of the things because things just are.
I'm disagreeing with your definition of nihilism as a lack of structure. I'm saying that nihilism is an assertion that nothing matters.
Mm-hmm.
That's a structure.
The assertion that nothing matters. Yes, to me, it's not a lack of structure. Is a lack of hierarchy in the structure. Like everything, like everything is equal because everything exists.
That's a hierarchy, though. Saying everything is equal because everything exists is
Huh.
is like a structure that says that puts everything in a flat hierarchy, basically.
Okay, but do we? I'm not literate in that, so I will take your words and I will try
Maybe
to
I was
find
being
more
pedantic.
information about that because to me a hierarchy presupposes that there are different levels, but
Okay. Now I'm getting the essence of what you're saying. I'm not trying to be like semantically coy in what I'm doing here. Yeah, you're saying nihilism is not thinking nothing matters. Nihilism is not knowing what matters, not knowing something matters more than another thing. It's a place of not
it's
knowing.
to me it's not only not knowing, is feeling lost in the fact that as you don't know what matters, you don't know, and I think it's congruent with what Dr. Peterson says is that without hierarchy of values, you cannot pursue anything. You cannot move. You're stuck. You're stuck because you don't know what the next move should be. It kills the heuristic, it kills the insight
Yeah, but
because it's the chaos and the void.
in practice though, it doesn't do that. What like there are still things that you end up doing. Like no matter how nihilistic you are, you know, what you'd expect a nihilist to do is just sort of lie in bed until they die, but they don't. They get up and they go and do things, and so there's still something in their shadow that they don't that there's to be seen or witnessed
Uh,
about their
yeah,
motivation.
that's why I think nihilism cannot really be a. That's why I think it's it's really tricky to say that, but is nihilism finally a an idea? You know, I look back to what I was saying before. Is that an idea? Because finally, when you're nihilistic, is you can say that propositionally, you can say that nothing matters, but
Right.
things matter because you're doing them automatically. Because if you don't, you die, and therefore you're not nihilistic. Because you're
Right.
not anymore. So you cannot claim that you're nihilistic. So
Yeah, that is interesting.
yeah, sorry. I know that so you give piano lessons.
Yep. Um, yeah, so it's in 20 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. So I will leave you the time to prepare yourself. You do it online or you go to the place, the conservatory
Uh,
or the music school?
yeah, they come here.
Oh,
So
okay. You receive. Okay, okay. Super
yeah,
nice,
so
super nice.
I could
Congratulations.
get ready in like, yeah, 7 minutes or something probably.
Great. But yeah, I think we've been talking for a fair amount
Yeah.
of time, and I have noted some things that I need to search for our next conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, man. This has been a very dynamic and interesting conversation for me. The
Me
amount
too.
of
Thank
the
you.
amount of scope that we're able to sort of connect on different points, it feels like a tremendously lateral and open conversation.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It was a real pleasure for me, and you brought me insight. So
Brilliant, man.
thank you very much, Joshua.
Well, let's
Take
do it
care of
again.
you. Yeah. See you next time. Have a nice evening.
You too.